The night was quiet. Too quiet. The wind whispered through the broken windows of the abandoned laboratory. Broken machines lay scattered on the floor, and strange flickering lights made shadows dance on the walls. Dust floated in the air, catching the dim glow like tiny stars. It was the kind of place most people would avoid, but tonight, someone was about to enter. Ethan walked carefully, his boots echoing softly on the metal floor. He was a young engineer, curious by nature, and rumors had led him here. People whispered about strange experiments, and sometimes lights in the lab would glow at night. No one knew what had happened, but Ethan wanted to see for himself. He stepped over a fallen chair and paused. A faint hum filled the air. It wasn't like electricity or a machine running. It was alive, something deep and strange. Ethan's heart beat faster. He followed the sound, moving toward a room at the far end of the lab. The door was half open. Inside, the room was dark, except for a soft blue light glowing in the corner. Ethan froze. There, in the middle of the room, was a glass cage. It was tall and smooth, with strange patterns etched into the glass. But it wasn't the cage itself that stopped him. It was what, or who, was inside. A figure floated slightly above the ground. At first, Ethan thought it was a mannequin, but the soft rise and fall of its chest told him it was alive. Its skin shimmered like moonlight on water, pale and glowing softly. Its eyes, large and deep, looked directly at him. They were a strange mix of colors like liquid silver and violet, and they reflected the dim light of the lab. Ethan swallowed hard. He had seen humans before, but this was different. The figure had delicate features, almost too perfect, and long hair that seemed to float in the air as if underwater. It was a woman, but not like any woman Ethan had ever seen. She looked alien. The alien woman's eyes widened as she saw Ethan. She raised her hands slowly, pressing them against the glass. Her fingers were long and elegant, with thin lines of light running along them. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Ethan realized she was trying to speak, but he could not understand a word. Fear flashed across her face, and she took a step back. The glass cage was her prison, and she was trapped. But why? Who had done this to her? And why was she left here, alone in this abandoned place? Ethan's mind raced. He knew he should run. This was dangerous. Anything could happen in a place like this. But he couldn't. Something about the woman's eyes pulled him in. He could feel her fear, but also her intelligence. She wasn't just a creature. She was thinking, planning, waiting, and somehow she needed him. He moved closer to the cage. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor and into his bones. The patterns on the glass shifted slightly, like they were alive. Ethan reached out his hand, but he stopped short of touching it. A small voice in his head screamed that this was risky, but curiosity and compassion were stronger than fear. The alien woman pressed her hand against the glass again. This time it left a faint glow where it touched. Ethan leaned in closer. She stared at him, and for a moment it felt like she was trying to tell him something without words. The hum seemed to respond, pulsing faster, as if the cage itself was alive and aware of their connection. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, a metallic click. Ethan spun around. Shadows moved in the corners of the room. He wasn't alone anymore. Someone, or something, was watching. The alien woman flinched, pressing herself against the back of the cage. Her eyes were wide with fear. Ethan took a deep breath. He had no plan, no weapons, no idea what was about to happen, but he couldn't leave her here. He couldn't ignore the silent plea in her eyes. He stepped closer, closer to the glass, closer to the unknown. "Don't worry," he whispered softly, though he wasn't sure if she could understand. "I'll help you." The hum grew louder, filling the room with a strange, vibrating energy. The patterns on the glass shifted again, more violently this time. Sparks of light flickered along the edges. The cage was not just a cage, it was a trap, a machine, something designed to keep her inside forever. And Ethan was the first human to come close enough to notice. The alien woman tilted her head, studying him. There was a spark of hope in her eyes. She reached toward him again, as if asking him to touch the glass, to understand her, to help her escape. Ethan's heart pounded. He had never felt this way before, not with any human. There was a connection here, something deep and urgent. But just as he reached out, the shadows in the room moved closer, and a low, menacing growl echoed. Something else was here, something dangerous. And Ethan realized with a cold shiver that saving her would not be simple. The alien woman's eyes met his again. There was fear, yes, but also trust. Somehow she had chosen him. Somehow he was the only one who could help her. Ethan clenched his fists. The hum grew louder, the shadows darker, and the room colder. He took a step forward. He was about to do something no one had done before, something that could change everything. And in that moment, the abandoned laboratory was no longer just a place of silence and dust. It had become the beginning of something extraordinary, something dangerous, something that would change both their lives forever. The glass cage pulsed softly, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on the alien woman inside. Her silver-violet eyes shone in the dim light, reflecting fear, curiosity, and something else, something he couldn't yet name. He felt drawn to her, like a magnet pulling him closer to the unknown. Then, suddenly, the cage shivered. Ethan stumbled back, startled. The woman's hand pressed harder against the glass, leaving a faint trail of glowing light. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if she were trying to communicate. He leaned in again, careful not to frighten her, and whispered, "I don't know how, but I'll help you. I promise." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hum from the cage grew louder, vibrating through the floor and into Ethan's chest. Tiny lines of light appeared along the patterns etched in the glass, forming shapes. Ethan squinted. It was as if she was trying to write, but without words he could recognize. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a notebook and pen. Maybe she can draw?" he murmured. He set them on the floor and gestured toward the cage. She tilted her head, watching him closely, her long hair floating slightly around her face. Then she did it. She traced a pattern on the inside of the glass with her glowing fingers. Ethan copied the shapes in his notebook as best as he could. They didn't form words, at least not any language he knew, but somehow he understood the meaning. Fear, danger, please help. Ethan's heart raced. The realization hit him. She wasn't just an alien trapped in a cage. She was intelligent, aware, and capable of thinking in ways humans could barely imagine. She was trying to reach out to him, and for the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. A sudden sound shattered the fragile quiet, a low metallic groan from somewhere deep in the lab. Ethan's head snapped toward the noise. Something moved in the shadows just beyond the flickering light. He froze, his heart pounded in his ears. The alien woman pressed herself back against the glass, and her eyes widened. She didn't just seem afraid, she seemed terrified. Ethan could feel it, a silent scream passing through the thin barrier. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he stayed. He couldn't leave her. Not now. He took a slow step forward, holding out his hands in a gesture of calm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." She tilted her head, studying him again. Slowly, she raised one finger and tapped the glass near his hand. The glow traced a line across the surface. Ethan followed the line with his finger. The glow faded, and then she did something surprising. She blinked her eyes rapidly, as if sending a signal, and then pressed her hand against the glass, palm to palm with him. A strange warmth spread through his skin. He could almost feel her emotions. Fear, hope, and a longing to be free. The hum grew louder again, vibrating through the cage, and Ethan noticed something unusual. The patterns etched in the glass weren't static. They were moving, like a living language, shifting and rearranging. He realized the cage was more than a prison. It was a machine, designed not just to contain her, but to communicate in a way humans could barely understand. Ethan stepped back, thinking quickly. He needed to understand how it worked. If he could figure out even a small part of it, maybe he could help her escape. He circled the cage, examining the edges, the locks, the glowing symbols. Every surface pulsed faintly with energy. Then he noticed something small, a crack, almost invisible, near the bottom. A shiver ran down his spine. Could this be a weak point? Could one human with no special tools really do what countless machines and creatures had failed to do? The alien woman seemed to sense his thoughts. She leaned closer to the crack, and a soft glow spread from her fingers across it. The glass hummed louder, almost warning him. Ethan felt the tension in the air, thick and electric. Something or someone was coming, and he had only moments to act. He knelt by the cage, whispering to her, "I don't know how, but I'm going to try. Trust me." Her eyes widened, and she pressed her hand firmly against the glass. For the first time, she seemed calm, almost hopeful. The shadows in the lab shifted again. The metallic groans grew louder, echoing off the walls. Ethan could feel the danger closing in. Every instinct told him to back away, but he stayed. He couldn't leave her, not when she had chosen him as her only chance. Time seemed to stretch. Every second felt heavy with anticipation. The alien woman's glow pulsed in rhythm with the hum, as if she were counting down something only she understood. Ethan's heart raced. He had never felt so alive and so terrified at the same time. And then, in that moment of tension, a strange thought crossed his mind. Maybe this was bigger than either of them. Maybe the cage, the lab, and even the alien woman were part of something much larger, something that could change the world forever. Ethan looked into her eyes, his own reflecting determination. "I don't know what's out there," he whispered, "but I'll get you out, no matter what." The alien woman's eyes shimmered, a silent promise passing between them. The first contact had been made, not with words, but with understanding, trust, and a spark of courage. And somewhere deep in the lab, the cage seemed to shiver again, as if it knew the game was about to change. The lab had grown colder. The hum from the glass cage was louder now, echoing through the empty hallways like a heartbeat of something alive. Ethan crouched near the cage, staring at the alien woman. Her eyes followed his every move, reflecting fear, hope, and a strange intelligence he could barely comprehend. For the first time, he realized the problem wasn't just the cage, it was the lab itself. Strange machines hummed, wires crisscrossed the floor, and faint red lights blinked like warning signals. Somewhere, deep in the shadows, he felt unseen eyes watching. They were waiting, watching, judging. Ethan leaned closer to the cage. "We need a plan," he whispered. The alien woman tilted her head, her glowing fingers tracing shapes in the air. It was her way of speaking, silent, yet urgent. Ethan watched carefully. She wanted him to understand something. He paced around the cage, examining every edge, every lock, every glowing line etched into the glass. It was clear this cage wasn't ordinary. The material was too smooth, too strong, and the locks seemed alive, not mechanical, but magical or alien, reacting to her presence. Ethan ran his fingers along the floor, picking up small pieces of debris, wires, and a broken metal rod. "Maybe we can use these," he muttered. He looked at the alien woman. Her eyes seemed to brighten as if approving his idea. But the cage was clever. It wasn't just a trap. Every time he touched it, the patterns on the glass shifted like they were watching him. He realized something terrifying. The cage knew what he was thinking. It was alive in its own way, designed to prevent escape. Ethan sat down on the floor, thinking. He had no instructions, no tools, no backup, just his mind and determination. He remembered the crack he had seen in the glass, faint but real. Could that be the key? Could one small weakness in a perfect cage save her? The alien woman reached out, pressing her hand near the crack. Light spread from her fingers, and Ethan watched in awe. The glow highlighted the weak spot in the glass. He felt a surge of hope. For the first time, the impossible felt possible. But then, a low rumble echoed through the lab. Ethan froze. Something was coming, something big. He could feel vibrations through the floor like footsteps from a creature too large to be human. He glanced at the alien woman. She tensed, her eyes wide with fear. "We don't have much time," Ethan whispered. "I need to act fast." He picked up the broken metal rod, testing its weight. It wasn't much, but if he hit the weak spot at the right angle, maybe, just maybe, it would break. The alien woman tilted her head and slowly pointed toward a corner of the room. Ethan followed her gaze and saw a small panel, partially hidden under dust and wires. A faint red light blinked behind it. It could be a control panel for the cage. If he could reach it, maybe he could weaken the locks from the inside. Ethan nodded to himself. The plan was forming. It would be risky, dangerous even, but it was the only chance they had. First, distract the cage, make it focus on something else. Second, weaken the weak spot with the rod. Third, reach the panel and disable the locks. He turned to the alien woman. "We're going to try something," he said. She blinked, a soft glow coming from her hands. It was a signal. She understood. She wanted to help him. Together, maybe they could succeed where no one else had. Ethan took a deep breath and prepared. He struck the rod lightly against the floor near the cage. The hum from the glass increased, a high-pitched whine that made his ears ache. The patterns on the glass shifted, almost like the cage was reacting to him. Then slowly he struck the weak spot. A small crack appeared, glowing faintly. The alien woman pressed her fingers against it and the glow spread, widening the crack. Ethan's heart raced. They were doing it. They were making progress. But the rumble grew louder. Shadows flickered in the corners of the lab. Ethan could hear footsteps, fast, purposeful. Someone was coming to stop them. He glanced at the alien woman. Her eyes held trust and urgency. They couldn't fail now. He moved toward the hidden panel, dodging wires and fallen debris. His hands shook as he reached for the small red light. A panel slid open, revealing a series of alien symbols and glowing buttons. He had no idea what they meant, but instinct told him which to press. The alien woman hovered closer, her glowing hands hovering above the buttons. As Ethan pressed the controls, the hum of the cage shifted, lower now, like it was weakening. The glow from the crack intensified. The cage was failing slowly, painfully, but it was failing. Then suddenly the rumble turned into a growl. Ethan froze. Something massive stepped into the lab, its shadow stretching across the walls. Its eyes glowed red and it moved with terrifying speed. Ethan's stomach dropped. This was no ordinary guard. It was a creature designed to prevent escape at all costs. The alien woman pressed her hands harder against the crack, glowing brighter. Ethan knew they had one chance. He gritted his teeth, pressed the final button, and braced for what might come next. The cage shuddered violently. Cracks spread across the glass like lightning. Sparks flew from the etched patterns. Ethan stumbled back, holding his hands up to shield himself. The alien woman's eyes shone brighter than ever, fixed on him, waiting for the final moment. And in that instant, the lab held its breath. Everything was about to change. The lab seemed to hold its breath. Dust floated in frozen motes, illuminated by the flickering blue glow of the glass cage. Ethan's hands shook, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Every nerve in his body screamed that the moment of truth had arrived. The alien woman inside the cage pressed her glowing hands against the widening crack, as if urging him on. Ethan glanced around. The shadows in the corners of the room were growing, moving with a strange, fluid rhythm. Something, or someone, was waiting, watching, and he could feel their eyes burning into him. The growl from earlier had not faded. It was getting closer, vibrating through the floor like a warning. He picked up the broken metal rod again, testing its weight in his hands. This was their only chance. The cage was their enemy, but so was whatever was coming. Every strike had to count. One wrong move, and it would be over, both for him and the alien woman. He took a deep breath and struck the crack. A sharp ringing echoed through the lab. The alien woman flinched but did not pull back. The crack widened slightly, glowing brighter, and the cage shivered violent. Ali! Ethan struck again, faster this time, and sparks flew from the etched patterns on the glass. The cage seemed alive, resisting with every ounce of its alien strength. Suddenly, a shadow lunged from the darkness. Ethan spun around, heart hammering. A massive creature emerged, its red eyes glowing in the dim light. Its claws scraped the metal floor, sending sparks flying. It was enormous, far bigger than any human, and it moved with terrifying speed. The alien woman let out a soft musical sound, her only voice, and it echoed in the lab like a warning. Ethan realized she was trying to help. She pointed with one glowing hand toward a panel on the far wall. The creature's attention shifted, its gaze following her. Ethan seized the opportunity. He darted toward the panel, pressing buttons and flipping switches as fast as he could. The hum from the cage shifted, dipping into lower tones, almost like a sigh. The alien woman pressed harder on the crack, and a sliver of glass finally broke loose, small but enough to let her slip her fingers through. The creature roared, sensing the change. Its claws scratched at the floor as it lunged toward them, but Ethan was ready. He grabbed a fallen piece of piping and swung it at the cage. The pipe hit with a sharp clang, cracking the glass further. The alien woman's glow flared, almost blinding him. Sparks danced around them, and the cage trembled as if it were about to collapse entirely. Ethan grabbed her hand through the crack. Her skin was cool and luminous, sending a jolt through his arm. She tugged gently, guiding him toward the next weak point in the cage. Together they worked, a silent team bound by urgency and trust. But the growl grew louder. The creature was close, too close. Ethan could hear its heavy breathing, feel the heat of its body through the floor. Time was running out. He struck again at the weak points, each hit sending shards of glowing glass scattering across the lab. The alien woman's fingers glowed brighter with each strike, as if lending him strength. Finally, with one last, desperate swing, the cage shuddered violently and cracked completely. A shower of sparks and shards flew into the air. The alien woman slipped free, landing lightly on the floor, her glowing hands brushing off the remaining fragments. She looked at Ethan with wide eyes, her lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, her expression radiated gratitude, relief, and a strange excitement. The creature let out a roar of frustration, claws slashing through the space where she had been trapped. It lunged, faster than Ethan could react. The alien woman stepped forward, her glowing hands extended. Energy pulsed from her fingers, hitting the creature in a wave that threw it back with a thundering crash. Sparks and smoke filled the lab. Ethan staggered, catching his breath. "Is it gone?" he whispered, barely able to speak. The alien woman tilted her head and glowed brighter, signaling yes, but her eyes warned that danger was not over. This was only the beginning. They moved quickly toward the exit. Broken glass crunched under their feet, the hum of the lab fading as the creature retreated to the shadows. The alien woman glanced at Ethan, and he realized something profound. She trusted him, not because of his strength, but because of his courage and determination. Outside the lab, The night air was cool and still. The wind carried a faint hum, like a song she alone could hear. Ethan watched her, fascinated. She looked otherworldly in the moonlight, her glow dimming slightly as she adjusted to freedom. She stepped closer to him, her fingers brushing his hand. A silent thank you, a promise, and a bond formed in moments of danger. But even as they paused to catch their breath, Ethan knew the threat had not disappeared. Whoever, or whatever, had put her in that cage would not let her go so easily. The shadows beyond the lab seemed to stir, waiting for the next move. Han looked down at her, determination hardening in his chest. "We're not done yet," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes shimmering with agreement. Together, they turned toward the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. The escape had worked, the first step was complete, but the road ahead was dangerous, and every step would demand courage, wit, and trust. One human and one alien, side by side against a world that wanted to keep them apart. And somewhere deep in the night, the hum of the cage echoed, a reminder that the fight had only just begun. The night outside the lab was eerily still. Ethan and the alien woman stood just beyond the shattered doorway, their breaths visible in the cool air. Freedom had a taste of relief, but it also carried a sharp edge of danger. The lab behind them was no longer safe, but leaving meant stepping into the unknown. The alien woman looked around cautiously, her glowing hands fading slightly but still illuminating their path. Ethan studied her, noticing the small scars along her arms, faint traces of where the cage had held her. The sight made his chest tighten. Freedom had been won, but it had come at a cost. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the night wind. She tilted her head, watching him carefully. Then for the first time she stepped closer, letting her fingers brush his arm in a gesture he understood as yes. But the sense of relief was short-lived. A sharp noise echoed from the trees surrounding the lab, a metallic clang, followed by a low, guttural growl. The creature they had seen before was not alone. Others had been waiting, silent in the shadows, and now they were moving. Ethan grabbed her hand firmly. "We have to move," he said. She nodded, her glowing eyes scanning the darkness. Together, they ran across the open ground, dodging fallen debris and broken wires. Sparks from the lab shim mirrored behind them, a fading reminder of the danger they had escaped. As they ran, Ethan realized something. The alien woman wasn't just running, she was leading him. Her glowing hands pointed toward a narrow passage between the trees. It was overgrown, almost hidden, but she seemed to know where it led. He followed without question, trusting her instincts completely. They reached a small clearing and paused. Ethan bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air. The alien woman crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the shadows. Something about her movements was graceful and precise, almost like she had been trained for survival. Ethan wondered what had happened to her before the cage. Suddenly, a screech pierced the night. A creature burst from the darkness, its red eyes glowing and claws extended. Ethan shouted, "Run!" and grabbed her hand. They sprinted through the undergrowth, branches scratching at their faces. He could hear the heavy footsteps behind them, closing the distance. The alien woman stopped suddenly, raising a glowing hand. Ethan skidded to a halt beside her. Through the underbrush, he saw a pit, a trap designed to catch them. He realized she had stopped them just in time. Without words, she pointed to a small fallen log, creating a path around the danger. They moved silently, avoiding the traps and shadows. Every step was tense, every rustle of leaves a possible threat. Ethan could feel his heart pounding, but he also felt a strange sense of exhilaration. This was no longer just about survival, it was about partnership, trust, and the courage to face something far bigger than themselves. After what felt like hours, they reached a rocky ridge overlooking a valley below. The alien woman stopped and looked at Ethan. Her eyes, glowing softly, conveyed a silent question. Ethan nodded, understanding immediately. They would descend into the valley, where the terrain would provide cover and a better chance of escape. But as they moved down the slope, a sudden roar echoed behind them. Ethan turned his head for just a moment and froze. Another creature was approaching, faster and more cunning than the first. It had learned from the others. It wasn't just hunting, they were being tracked. The alien woman reacted instantly. She extended both hands, sending a wave of glowing energy toward the creature. It staggered, letting out a screech of frustration. Ethan grabbed her hand again, pulling her forward as they ran down the slope. The glow of her hands lit the path just enough to see where they were going, but it also drew attention. Ethan's lungs burned and his muscles ached, but he refused to stop. Every time the creatures lunged, the alien woman's glow held them back, buying precious seconds. He realized that her freedom came with a cost, not just for her, but for him too. Every step he took risked injury or death, but leaving her behind was not an option. Finally, they reached a shallow river cutting across the valley. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to cross, but the alien woman pointed to a series of rocks forming a natural bridge. Carefully, they made their way across, each step testing their balance. Behind them, the creatures halted at the riverbank, unwilling or unable to follow further. Ethan exhaled a long, shaky breath as they reached the other side. The alien woman's glow dimmed, and she looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and sorrow. Ethan understood. They were free for now, but the cost of freedom had been high. They had escaped the cage and immediate danger, but the world outside was vast, unknown, and full of threats. He turned to her. "We made it," he whispered. She nodded, stepping closer and letting her hand rest lightly on his arm. No words were spoken, but a bond had formed, stronger than any language. They were allies now, and their journey was only beginning. The wind rustled through the valley, carrying the faint hum of the shattered lab bahia in them. Freedom had been claimed, but the cost was clear. Every step forward would demand courage. Every choice could be life or death. And somewhere deep in the shadows, those who had captured her were already planning the next move. Ethan and the alien woman moved quietly through the valley, side by side. Freedom had been won, but it came with a warning. The world beyond the lab would not forgive weakness. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Ethan realized that their true challenge was only just beginning. The valley was quiet now. The first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a pale glow over the rocky terrain. Ethan and the alien woman walked side by side, their steps careful and deliberate. The creatures from the lab had stopped chasing them, for now, but both knew the danger had not disappeared. Ethan glanced at her. For days she had been a mystery, a being from another world trapped in a cage. Yet now, freed, she was learning to move, to breathe, to exist beyond her prison. And still she spoke no words he could understand. Their communication was silent through gestures, glances, and the soft pulsing of her glow. She stopped suddenly by a small stream. Kneeling, she cupped her hands and let the water flow through her fingers. The glow of her skin reflected on the rippling surface, painting the water in colors Ethan had never seen. He knelt beside her, dipping his hand into the stream. The cold water shocked him, but she merely watched, tilting her head as if studying him. He realized she was trying to teach him something, an understanding of her world, her nature, and the way she experienced life. Words were unnecessary. The rhythm of her movements, the patterns of her glowing hands were enough to communicate. Slowly, he began to mimic her gestures, tracing lines in the water and air. She watched, then repeated the motions. A silent conversation bloomed between them, delicate and fragile, yet strong enough to connect two completely different beings. As they continued along the stream, Ethan asked the question that had been on his mind since the moment he had freed her. Why were you captured? Why the cage? She stopped and looked at him, her silver violet eyes wide and deep. Then, with a movement of her hand, she traced a symbol in the air. A star surrounded by lines like a web. Ethan frowned, unsure what it meant. She pointed to herself, then to the horizon, then made a sweeping gesture, like showing a vast network. Slowly, it became clear. She had knowledge, information that others wanted, secrets powerful enough to trap her in a cage and risk everything to retrieve her. Ethan's mind raced. Could this knowledge change the world? Could it be why creatures and enemies were hunting her? The alien woman's glow pulsed faster as she traced another set of symbols. Ethan copied them in his notebook, not understanding the meaning, but sensing their importance. There was urgency in her movements. She was warning him, preparing him, even though he could not fully comprehend the message. Hours passed as they walked, their connection deepening with every gesture and shared glance. Ethan learned to read her subtle signals, when she was anxious, when she sensed danger, when she wanted him to slow down. She, in turn, seemed to trust him completely, following his movements without hesitation, relying on him as much as he relied on her. By the time the sun was high in the sky, they reached a small clearing surrounded by cliffs. Ethan stopped to catch his breath. The alien woman stood beside him, glowing softly, and for the first time, she made a sound, a soft, melodic note, almost like a song. Ethan froze, mesmerized. It was not language, not words, but emotion itself made audible. He reached out, gently touching her glowing hand. Her light flared at the contact, then settled into a steady pulse. He felt something deep inside, a connection that went beyond words, beyond surround. Species. beyond the cage that had once held her. For the first time, he understood. They were partners now, bound by trust, survival, and a shared purpose. Then, a shadow moved in. The trees. Ethan tensed, but she reacted instantly. Her glow flared, brighter and sharper than before. She stepped in front of him, protective, alert. Something was watching them. Something was following. Ethan's mind raced. Even in freedom, they were not safe. Whoever had captured her, or sent the creatures after them, was still tracking them. Yet, seeing her courage, her awareness gave him strength. He realized that their connection was more than emotional. It was tactical. They could face danger together because they understood each other in ways that words could never capture. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they found a sheltered spot among the rocks. Ethan built a small fire while the alien woman hovered nearby, her glow soft and calming. For a moment, the danger seemed distant. He watched her, fascinated by the way she adjusted to life outside the cage, learning, observing, adapting. He reached for his notebook and sketched the symbols she had traced. Slowly, carefully, he tried to understand the patterns, the meanings hidden in the glow. She leaned over his shoulder, her eyes following his hand. When he hesitated, unsure of a line, she guided him gently with her fingers. They worked together, silently, learning from each other, building a bond stronger than fear. Night fell and the stars began to appear above them. The alien woman's glow dimmed, blending with the starlight. Ethan felt a deep sense of awe, not just at her, but at the connection they had formed. She had been trapped, alone and helpless, yet now she trusted him completely. And he, for the first time, felt a sense of purpose beyond himself, to protect her, to help her survive, and to uncover the secrets she carried. Somewhere in the distance, faint growls and rustling reminded them that danger was never far. But for now, in this moment, they were together. Their connection was a shittud. Eld, a language beyond words, a promise that neither would face the coming threats alone. And as the night deepened, Ethan realized that saving her had been only the first step. Understanding her, learning from her, and forming this unspoken bond, that was the key to surviving what was coming next. The cage had been broken, but the real journey had only just begun. The night was darker than any Ethan had ever seen. Clouds blocked the stars, and a heavy wind rattled the cliffs around the valley. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, sounded like a warning. Ethan and the alien woman moved cautiously, side by side, their bond stronger than ever, but their nerves stretched tight. They had come far since the cage. Freedom was theirs, but it had made them visible, marked by the very enemies who had trapped her. Ethan glanced at her glowing hands. They pulsed softly, a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. She looked at him, her eyes wide and determined. No words were needed. Together they would face whatever came next. Suddenly the ground trembled. A low growl rolled through the valley, followed by multiple footfalls, heavy and deliberate. Ethan stiffened. From the shadows, shapes began to emerge, creatures larger and faster than any they had faced before. Their red eyes glowed like embers, and their claws dug into the rocky ground. The alien woman stepped forward, her glow flaring brighter. Energy arced along her fingers, and Ethan felt the warmth of it brush against his arm. They were ready. She would not be recaptured. Not now, not ever. The first creature lunged. Ethan sidestepped, swinging a jagged piece of metal he had picked up from the forest floor. Sparks flew as it collided with the creature's claw. The alien woman extended her hands, sending a wave of energy that knocked another back. Together, they moved as one, anticipating each other's actions. Every attack she made, he mirrored with instinctive precision. But there were too many. The creatures advanced, circling, herding them toward the cliff edge. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't fight forever. There had to be a way to turn the fight to their advantage. He glanced at the alien woman. Her glow pulsed urgently. She was thinking, planning, and he trusted her to guide the strategy. He spotted it, a narrow ledge above them, jagged but climbable. If they could reach it, they could gain the high ground. "This way," he shouted, grabbing her hand. She followed instantly, pulling herself and him up over rocks and roots. The creatures lunged after them, but the climb slowed them down. At the top of the cliff, the alien woman paused. She raised both hands, her glow bright enough to light the entire ridge. Ethan felt a wave of heat radiate from her. Energy built between her fingers like a storm waiting to be unleashed. The creatures below hesitated, their glowing eyes narrowing as if sensing the power. Ethan nodded. He knew what she was planning. "Do it!" he shouted. With a graceful, fluid motion, she released the energy. It surged downward like a lightning storm, striking the creatures with unrelenting force. Screeches filled the air as they were thrown back, stumbling over rocks and each other. Ethan barely kept his balance, but he held onto her hand, letting her power guide them. The creatures regrouped, but their advance had been broken. Ethan realized they had underestimated her. Her freedom was not just survival, it was power beyond imagination. Each pulse of her glow radiated strength, determination, and intelligence. She had been trapped, yes, but now she was unstoppable. Suddenly, one massive creature leapt toward them from behind. Ethan swung the metal rod instinctively, but it wasn't enough. The alien woman reacted instantly. Her glow flared brighter and a beam of energy shot out, striking the creature midair. It crashed into the rocks below with a deafening roar, finally silenced. For a moment, everything was still. The wind carried the echoes of battle across the valley. Ethan and the alien woman stood together, glowing light washing over them. They were exhausted, but victorious. The creatures lay scattered, unable to continue the fight. Freedom had been defended at last. Ethan looked at her, awe written across his face. You did it, he whispered. She blinked at him, her glow dimming slightly as she stepped closer. She reached out, gently touching his cheek with her hand. A warmth spread through him, a silent thank you, more powerful than any words could be. But even in victory, there was understanding. The world beyond the valley would not be easy. They had survived this night, but challenges awaited them. Together, however, they were stronger than any enemy, smarter than any trap, and braver than any fear. The alien woman's glow pulsed softly, as if echoing his thoughts. Then she raised her eyes to the horizon. Ethan followed her gaze. Beyond the cliffs, a vast, uncharted landscape awaited. The cage was destroyed, the creatures defeated, and the first battle won. But their journey had only begun. He reached for her hand. "We face it together," he said, simple words that carried everything he felt. She nodded, a soft glow enveloping them both. In that moment, they weren't just human and alien. They were partners, allies, and friends bound by trust, courage, and the knowledge that together they could face anything. The valley fell silent, except for the faint hum of her energy. Stars peeked through the clouds, glimmering above them. Ethan realized the truth. Saving her had been only the first step. Understanding her, protecting her, and standing together against the unknown, that was the real adventure. As they began moving toward the horizon, side by side, the alien woman glanced at him, her eyes shimmering with gratitude and determination. Ethan smiled faintly. Freedom had to come at a cost, but they had survived. Together, they were unstoppable. And somewhere, deep in the night, the faint hum of the shattered cage echoed, a reminder that even broken chains could not hold back the power of courage, trust, and unity.